Okay, so let's get talking about today. One of the things I kind of want to cover today is opening up questions on where to start with writing the paper, what to be looking for, what are the first things that you guys should be looking at. And so that's a big thing I want to focus on today. And just to kind of get you in a good position to feel comfortable writing the paper. So if we go ahead and go to Blackboard, what you're going to notice is, let's go to your courses. So we'll just go to section 5 for the sake of argument. Now, when you go to week 5, you're going to notice a couple of things if you haven't already. So you have Journal 5 on March 1st. There's one more after this, so then we'll be done with the writing journals for the time being. Um, Big thing is writing guidelines. Make sure that you watch this first. The writing guidelines are really important. It's the reason I designed this, and it's a long video. It's 40 minutes, so we don't have time to review it here. Um, but there's a couple of things that I want you to just keep in mind as you go through this. This is a video version of what the writing guidelines PDF is, which you'll notice is down here, the writing checklist. And this is a list of everything that you should and should not be doing in order to make sure that you're not making simple mistakes on your paper. So this is for you to make sure that formatting is done correctly, to make sure that you're not using minimal uses of pronouns, no abbreviations, no contractions, making sure that you're double checking for errors, how to make sure that you're properly doing citations. So things like that. And so that's what we're going to be looking at with when we're looking at these things. The next week, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have a short citation video to give you an idea of what's going on how to kind of clear up citations in the paper. I've also included how to cite within for newspaper articles. So that's included at the bottom. So your works cited page should just have 3 sources on your hot newspaper. It should just have the 3 newspaper articles that you use. And I've provided the citation format right here for you. I've also shown how to go ahead and quote or to quote cite within a parenthetical citation for APA. For Chicago, you would just use superscript. I'm also including a citations video that will be uploaded today. So that will be something for you to review. And we'll have a kind of a broader citation workshop next week. So that'll be something to take a look at. So that citation video should be up within, well, as soon as this is done, as a matter of fact, because it's uploading now. And then the next thing that you're going to be looking at is how to structure a paper. So this is actually going to give you some background on what are the qualifiers or what are the key aspects of putting a paper together, kind of in the abstract, in the looking at it on high. Like what are the objectives that you're trying to reach when you're structuring a paper to make sure that it's coherent, that it's well put together, that it's accurate, that it's concise. And so we go over a couple of things. And then I also have 2 videos that are included in this lecture that it'll say to go ahead and watch these. And then this will be right here. And one from PBS and one from MSNBC, and things that I want you to go ahead and check out. I've also left a reference on searching for research for newspaper articles if you still need to make any adjustments. I noticed that some of you had included sources all from one category. So I noticed some of you included sources that were all from a domestic source or all from a web-based source. So you want to make sure that you have that diversity of sources, that you're making sure that the sources that you're getting are from each of the categories, mainstream, web-based, and international, that you're getting one from each bucket. So that's something that I want you to make sure of. Other than that, that's going to be the primary focus of this week. The other thing that I need you to make sure that you do, and soon if you haven't already, there's 3 things that there's 3 elements on this prompt that you need to read like yesterday, just ASAP. So one is the actual hot news guide. This is the how-to of what you should be doing in the paper. What is it covering? What are the requirements? What are the basic instructions? What to cover? What the goals of the paper are? Like, what is the whole point of doing this? And then what to not do. And one of the big ones is do not spend most of your time summarizing each story. The majority of the paper should be about similarities and differences in coverage. That's going to be the primary focus of the paper, is what are the similarities and differences in the coverage. You only need to detail as much as you need to get that discussion off the ground. And the big one that will get you into hot water is do not give your opinion on the news story. I don't care if you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, or you think that this is something that shouldn't be happening, or this is something that should be changed or is good. I don't care. This is your one-way ticket to getting a C or lower. Is do not give your opinion on the subject matter. I don't care what you think about gun control or DACA or abortion or vaccines or COVID or whatever. I don't care. I don't want to know. I'm doing this on purpose because you'll get in grad school, you'll have questions about talk about the merits or demerits of a particular argument, not necessarily whether or not you like it or not, or why do you think it's good or not. You just need to be able to summarize and distill what the main topics were or what the similarities and differences are. You're looking at it as a comparative analysis. You're not making any kind of recommendations. You're not making any kind of assertions. That you'll have plenty of time for that in other assignments, but we're crawling before we can run. So do not give your opinion on a news story. I can't focus that enough. Do not do it. So then I give you a basic kind of outline of just how you should kind of put together your paper. And then you're like, well, okay, I have an outline, but what does this kind of look like? Well, I do you one better. I give you not one, but two real papers that people have turned in and gotten A's on. So if you want to review like what exactly a paper looks like for this class, and I had permission from the student to go ahead and upload this, you can actually see how it was done and how it was cited, how it was put together. So something that you need to be looking at. And then you'll also see that over here. Same thing with this paper. It has a whole thing. And then you notice, and I do have some like critiques on there, so things for you to check out. And so this is what I want you to be able to look at. So you should read this after we're done with class today. This is the first thing you should read, is just look at these two papers. That way it gives you an idea of what this looks like. I don't want to be like you having to feel like you have to second guess on what you do or do not have to do for this paper. I wanted to be abundantly clear, like what is required and what needs to be gone over in the paper. So I want you to go ahead and take a look at that. I think that will make you feel so much better about your paper and like what you need to do to put it together by looking at these elements: the hot news guide, the writing checklist, the hot news example, and then making sure you watch the writing guidelines video, the writing guidelines lecture, because this will go over all the basics you need to make sure of as you're going through these things. With that being said, the one other thing that I want to go over is I'm going to give a brief presentation on citation formats just to get this off the ground. So I'm going to show you this video of my citation lecture. We're going to talk about it now. And then I'm also going to have, this will also be, so this video that I have edited is going to be uploading to the YouTube channel. I realized I had a new YouTube channel and this video wasn't up. So please make sure to review the citations. That way you're kind of working through it. So we're going to show you this, and then for the remainder of for the last half hour of our meeting time, I'm going to open it up to discussion. So do me a favor, take a look at this, be sure to take notes, have questions ready for me, and then we'll move on the other side. Okay, so let's take a And then if you have any questions, I'll have my chat open. That way, if you need to ask any questions on the fly, I'll be answering questions in chat. So let me go ahead and do that. Hey everyone, so I want to go ahead and talk about citation formats, and I'm going to go. How's the sound, by the way? Is the sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, good. For APA and Chicago, but I want to go over APA primarily since that's what most of you are using anyway. But if you're using APA right now for your other classes and for your major, go ahead and use APA. If you're using Chicago for your major, go ahead and use Chicago. Either one is fine. You don't have to learn another citation format just for the sake of this class. So just use the citation format that you're using currently when you're writing your papers, your formal written papers. So that's what we're going to do there. By the way, the other thing I want to mention before we get into the keynote is that there will be a workshop after this. So it'll be linked right underneath this in Blackboard. And just note that, yes, the examples are going to be done in APA. That's just for the purposes of the workshop. But if you're using Chicago largely, outside of that workshop, you feel free to go ahead and use Chicago. That's just for the purposes of the workshop. So let's get to it. So when it comes to citation formats, the role of citations help in the academic process to research and challenge the finding of another's work. And it's kind of this like cycle of there's a study and then analysis and then opinions are written from that and then critiques are made. And in order for us as a community, as a scientific community, to look at, how those people need to be able to cite their work, cite where things were getting from, because then the experiments and the studies and the data can be replicated and critiqued and challenged. And it goes on and on and on until we get to academic consensus, which, sometimes doesn't happen. And oftentimes when it does, it comes from this ongoing process of study, analysis, opinion, critique, study, analysis, opinion, critique. But the idea primarily with citations is it lets the reader know which ideas are your own and which are the ones that are from someone else. And that's the great thing when you're writing a paper. If you're writing something and there's no citation there, the idea is that, okay, I guess that's coming out of your own head. If you are citing something, that means that you are attributing where that came from. So that's the importance of that, because then if people want to, let's say that you're writing a longer, study, and somebody wants to be able to understand like where you got these things from, to understand like where your data, is formulated from, they can find it by using the citations. And it's really important to have that, because you'll notice when you start doing academic research, we're looking at journal articles, for instance, it's going to be imperative upon you to have those citations from your authors, because then you can find other work that is derivative of what they're talking about. So it's really important to do that. And so there are two primary formats that we're usually talking about. It's APA, the American Psychological Association, and that uses an in-text parenthetical citation and a works cited page. And then we have Chicago, and that uses, there's a couple styles of it, but the one that I prefer to talk about is the footnote citation. So you have a citation at the as a footnote, and then you have a works cited page as well. So both of these also just have works cited pages in general. You are expected, regardless of your citation format, you are expected to be doing a works cited page. So make sure that with all formal papers or formal assignments that a works cited page is included. Just put it this way: if you have to cite something, you have to put a works cited page. So let's look at APA format. So there's two things. We're primarily looking at journal articles and newspaper articles right now. So we're going to look at what those elements are. So for a journal article, you're going to have the last name, the year, and the page number. That's going to be the in-text parenthetical citation. So that's what you're going to be putting in within your paragraph, within your sentence as you're citing it. With a newspaper article, most newspaper articles are electronic now. So God bless you if you're pulling out a physical copy of the New York Times, but most people aren't. So you just need the last name and the year. You'll notice that in the works cited page, newspaper articles will typically include the full URL, whereas journal articles will include the page number And it also will have something called a DOI, so Director of Information. So we'll get into that when we go into researching journal articles. So when it comes to general rules of citing, this just talks about everything in general, not just APA, but if it does not come out of your own head, cite it. Cite, 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 cite frequently, cite often. It's really important for you to cite, particularly in this class. Make sure that you're citing, because here's the thing. No one's ever going to get mad at you for citing too much. Someone might tell you, hey, you can cool it down on the cites. But if you cite too little, then somebody could misinterpret that as plagiarism, and then you're in front of an ethics board determining whether or not you're going to get expelled. So it's always preferable to cite more often, because of the fact that it also not only does it just protect you, but at the same time it clarifies what are your ideas and what comes from other sources. So if it does not come out of your own head, cite it. And the 2 elements for a newspaper, or 3 elements if it's a journal, should always be in the sentence in some way. Now, they can be in prose within the body text of your paper. So if we look at this example, Trevelyan 2017 notes that sea levels are rising, page 707. You'll notice that we have the last name, we have the year, and those are in APA, that's always going to be next to each other. Last name, year. It doesn't matter if it's at the beginning of the sentence within prose, or if it's at the end of the sentence as a parenthetical citation like we see in the second example. The last name and the year are always going to be next to each other. And then notes that sea levels are rising, page 707. You notice that because of this, there's a page number. We can infer that this is a journal article. So this is page 707. We make sure we put that at the end. Notice that the period is after the parenthetical citation. Now let's take a look at this. If you're doing just a straight up parenthetical citation, so the entire citation is at the end. So a recent study notes that sea levels are rising. You notice how we changed the wording a bit. So now we have last name, year, page number. You notice again in the parenthetical citation, last name, year, and then page number. So you're always going to have those 3 elements when it's with a journal. If this was a newspaper, you would just leave out the page number. So let's look at some news articles and example a little deeper. Since the nature of news sources are now electronic, you only need the name and year. So let's look at examples. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of different ways to say the same sentence. So if you're mentioning, for instance, the first one mentions the actual publication. According to a piece in the New York Times, quote, the president has not yet made a statement, end quote, Safin 2007, period. You notice that the period is after the parenthetical. It's not within the quotation mark like it typically would be without it. So let's look at this next sentence. According to Safin 2007, the president has not yet made a statement. Well, we're mentioning the author. So according to Safin 2007, then we're attributing dialogue. So we're going to go ahead and put a quote, comma right there. We open up the quotation. The president has not yet made a statement. You notice that the period is back inside the quotation mark. Because we don't have a parenthetical citation, we put the period back where it was within the quotation mark. The thing that you need to know is the fact that when you have a parenthetical citation at the end of something, like we see in the first and the last examples, it's because the citation is part of the sentence. You're still letting people know like where this piece of information came. And so the period is to signify the end of the sentence and the end of the idea in its entirety, which is why we put the period at the end of the parenthetical citation. So let's take a look and see if we just wanted to paraphrase and not mention the author until the end, and we just wanted to mention the publication. The New York Times state that the president has not yet made a statement, Safin 2007. You notice we put the period in there. We're not quoting anything because we're just paraphrasing it, but we always have the last name and the year. So let's continue. Let's look at, for instance, if we had one author, we can go ahead and adjust those. And you'll notice from here, just these are the way that the examples are going to be throughout the rest of these slides. So when we have one author, according to Drax 2007, the data suggests that little can be done by U.S. intervention. Notice the name, last name, and year, always together. The period is inside the quotation mark because we're not using a page number. Or what we can do is a 2007 study by the UN states, comma, quotation mark, the data suggests that little can be done by US intervention. Drax 2007. Well, here's an interesting thing. I already said 2007, a 2007 study. Why do I need to put 2007 in the citation? Because the study could have been done in 2007, but it doesn't necessarily mean it was published in 2007. It could have easily been published in 2008, 2009. So just because the study happened in 2007, the date where it says Drax 2007, that year needs to be the year of publication. So, and then let's look at this last one where we're using the author, but we're just paraphrasing. Drax 2007 argues that little can be done by US intervention. Let's look at two authors. According to Green and Largo 2015, gun violence has risen by 20% since 2012. You notice this really hasn't changed too much from our one author. All you're basically doing is saying Green and Largo. And it's the same thing when you go to the second, when you go to our second example, where you're putting it as a parenthetical citation. A recent study on gun violence found a rise of 20% since 2012, parentheses Green and Largo. And you notice that the period is at the end of the parenthetical citation, but in the first one, it's still within the quotation marks. Let's look at three authors. It's just adding more. According to Carver, Sanchez, and Stromberg, 2019, gun violence has risen by 20% since 2012. You're just adding another name, except this time now you're just putting commas in between it, which, for those of you who remember, that would have been Rule 3, items in the series. A recent study on gun violence found a rise of 20% since 2012. Since we're paraphrasing here and we're just putting in the parenthetical citation, Carver, Sanchez, and Stromberg. So you're just adding your names. Now, let's say if we want to look at an academic journal example. So let's say that we're doing, here's a similar kind of sentences, but now let's say that we wanted to include page numbers with those. So if this was an academic journal with page numbers that we were citing, let's take a look at this. According to Drax 2007, the data suggests that little can be done by U.S. intervention, page 27. The thing you should notice now is the period has now left that quotation mark, and page 27 now is put there. So we got it. That's still part of the sentence because it's the citation is still part of the whole idea that we're saying. So the period has to be after the parenthetical citation. So after the page number. Or if we looked at the paraphrase, a 2007 or the quote, a 2007 study by the UN states the data suggests that little can be done by U.S. intervention. Drax 2007, page 27. You notice in here, since it's at the end, the parenthetical citation has all three of the elements we need because we're talking about an academic journal now. So Drax 2007, page 27. Or if we wanted to paraphrase, Drax 2007 argues that little can be done by U.S. intervention, page 27. Let me just put the period there. Now, let's say if we want two authors in an academic journal, you're noticing a pattern here. We're just including the names, and then the page number goes at the end. You move your period. You notice that now the period is moved to after page 471 instead of being after gun violence has risen by 20% since 2012, quote. You notice that the period is left being before the quotation mark and is now after the parenthetical where the page number is. But if we were to do the paraphrase down and the second example, you'll notice it's just Green and Largo 2015, page 471. We're including all of our information just at the end of the parenthetical citation. So let's take a look at three authors. According to Carver, Sanchez, and Stromberg, gun violence has risen by 20% since 2012. You're noticing a pattern. You're just putting your page number at the end, or you're including it in total in the parenthetical citation at the end of the paragraph. But so you're noticing the page number is always at the end, either by itself or with all the other information. Now, here's an interesting thing. If we have four or more authors, here's where it gets fun. You can do, according to Whitaker et al., 2019, gun violence has risen by 20% since 2012, page 471. So according to Whitaker et al means and everybody else. So it's Latin, et al, just and everyone else. So Whitaker would be the first named author of the journal article, or maybe you have a newspaper article that has like 7 people on it. So you would just put the first name. If you've ever taken the time to notice, those names are not in alphabetical order, and there's a reason for that. The people who are first are usually the ones who did the most work or the most prominent in that work. So that's why it's like it's a thing to be called a first named author in a journal article. Because that's the seat of most prominence. So those are the people that are quoted. So when you have like an et al. So according to Whitaker et al., and it could be Smith et al. Or Jones et al. Or Chang et al. Or Lopez et al. It doesn't matter. So whatever whatever the last name is, the first person that's cited in that in your work, you're going to go ahead and use their name, and then et al. Will be for the rest of it. So this is when you have 4 or more authors. So if you wanted to do this, a paraphrase, a recent study on gun violence found a rise of 20% since 2012. You notice that at the bottom on the second example, in the parenthetical, we just have Whitaker et al., which basically means Whitaker and everyone else, 2019, page 471. You'll go ahead and write all of the names when you do it in your works cited, but for the sake of brevity, so you're not writing all these names over and over and over and over again, that's why et al. Is implemented as a kind of a time saver and a space saver. Now, what happens if people are referencing authors within their work? So this is how you would do it. Let's say that Whitaker is mentioning Koskov in his work. So what you would do is you would just say that Koskov is mentioned in Whitaker. So here's how you would put it. A meta-analysis of the data shows long-term trends suggesting a lack of civic engagement. Koskov, 2011, so that's the actual work that was mentioned. And then the paper that you're actually reading and citing is Whitaker et al., page 471. So Koskov, 2011, in Whitaker et al., 2019, page 471. So this is about as complex as you can get it. So just something to think about. Now, the APA Works Cited page, this is what it should look like for a news source: last name, first initial, middle initial, year, month, date, title of article, date of publication, and the URL. Because because for the newspapers you're using electronic sources primarily, almost exclusively, it's really important that you include the full URL. So when you click on the URL box inside there, so you can when you actually can type the web address, you need to do the entire thing. So you need to make sure that it's the entire web page that particular article is on. It can't just be theguardian.com. It's got to be the whole thing. And so you'll notice right here, I put Lee. So that's the last name is Lee. First initial is B. And then it was in 2020, March 4th. So you're noticing year, month, date. Title, Bond movie, No Time to Die, Bush back till November. That's the title. Then we have it. The publication was The Guardian. You notice it's all separated by periods. And then you put the entire URL. So it's not just The Guardian, it's the whole thing. Make sure you do that. And then when you're doing a works cited page for a journal article, that's how you would go ahead and take care of it this way. And you could do, if there's several authors, you would go ahead and include that, the year, the title of the article, the title of the periodical, the actual title of the journal it was published in, and then the volume number and issue number, and then the page number. So if we look right here, Dodds and Funnel, 2018, From Casino Royale to Spectre, Daniel Craig's James Bond, Journal of Popular Film and Television. You notice that it's italicized, indicating that that's the journal of publication. Then we have the volume number, the issue number is in parentheses, and the page number 2 through 10. Don't get too daunted about this. You just basically paint by numbers. Go ahead and just follow the examples that I post here. And I also took the liberty of posting the examples. If you go ahead and look at the prompt for the hot news assignment for the hot newspaper, I actually took the liberty of putting up what the works cited entries should look like in your prompt. So if we're looking at the Chicago format, I have a feeling that if you've done Chicago, that you've probably done a bit of it before. It's a relatively technical format. So there's a couple of tricks that I would recommend for you if you've been doing Chicago. If you need help with it, please, I like to talk about Chicago more through office hours and actually get our hands dirty actually doing some examples. But just a couple of things. If you're doing Chicago, make your works cited page first. It's so much easier. Because you can use the works cited, citation, like your works cited page citation, as a foundation for your footnote, because a lot of the elements are the same. Because the footnotes that you put in are going to be the full citation with the specific name, the specific page or the page range used. Then you'll have a truncated citation, which is a shortened version of that for every other citation you use. And then if you use the same citation over and over and over and over again, after the third one, you can just use IBID, which basically means after two citations, if it's the same, that it, oh, by the way, this is the same page. I'll demonstrate this in the next slide. So here's what we had. This is what your footnote would look like for the first time. You only do the full citation the first time, and you notice that there's a page, there's no page range, or there's no like 190 to 200. It's not like a full article. You're noticing it's just a page 189. So you do that one citation. Now, the next time that we ever have to cite this, we would go ahead and use the last name, and you notice it's just the last name. There's no need to use the full name anymore. And we've also shortened the title from, instead of Islamic Bomb Development of the Pakistan Nuclear Program, we've just shortened it to Islamic Bomb, and then we've had page 190 to 191. Now, let's say that we reference page 190 to 191 again, and then we needed to reference it again. On the third time, you would use IBID, but that's only if you've already mentioned it beforehand. And it's the exact same thing. So it's a little confusing when and when not to use IBID. Good rule of thumb is if you're using the exact same citation sequentially, like I'm using page 191 and then I'm citing page 191 again, and then I'm citing page 191 again, you can use IBID to save yourself some space. But the minute you go to page 192, you've got to go back to that second one, that middle one, because that's the truncated one. The one at the top, you only need to do once in your entire paper. You've established that we know what you're talking about. Then for the rest of the paper, you're going to kind of fill in the middle for most of it, because you're going to be jumping back and forth probably when it comes to, larger papers or papers that involve multiple sources. But if you need more clarification on Chicago, because Chicago has some funny rules sometimes, and it can take a little handle of getting used to. But I'd be happy to answer it through office hours and actually get our hands dirty doing it if you do use Chicago. Okay, and then you'll see the citation workshop next week. So that'll be something that you guys will work on next week. That'll be due going on. So you'll see that in week 6. Well, so what do I have questions on? So we have the hot news paper itself and what we should be looking at and comparing and contrasting, and also any questions about citations or anything like that, or any other kind of clarifying questions that you guys might have in terms of working through this stuff. What do we think?
I have a quick question regarding the outline for the hot news topic.
Mhm.
So when you say summarize the story, do you mean like the story we're talking about, or like the news article that we chose?
Yeah, so if you're picking a story on let's say, the yesterday Supreme Court decided that Donald Trump's taxes could be could be sent to the grand jury, and you looked at that from 3 different sources. So what you would do is you would just summarize the story in brief that on February 22nd, on Monday, February 22nd, the Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump's taxes can be introduced as evidence in a grand jury proceeding. The Southern District of New York is looking into potential financial crimes and wire fraud done by the Trump organization over the past some odd years period. And then, and then that would be it. You would just summarize like, what is the story, like in a nutshell. And then, because the idea is, all right, so what's the story that you're looking at? Okay, now how have these 3 sources covered it? Like, what were the points that they looked at, or what were the things that they focused on more or less, or didn't focus at all, if that makes sense?
Yeah. And then I had another question regarding the photos, the infographics, and the videos, if our sources had any.
Mhm.
So basically, if I could say one like NBC News had a video of like House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, I think, talking about police reform. Others included pictures from the riots. Is that like basically what
That's
it is?
exactly what I'm looking at, because here's the thing, all of that is intentional. Like, what they put on that website is intentional. They want you to see it in relationship to that story. So it's not just the words that are written, but it's the choices that are made in terms of what kind of information is also shown on that site. Like what kind of pictures are they showing? What kind of captions are they putting in those pictures?
Mhm.
Are they showing kind of any graphs or data or infographics or things like that? Are
Okay.
they, are they showing video? What kind of video are they showing? Are they showing just kind of like, if it's a DACA one, are they just showing DACA protesters, or are they showing like interviews from like lawmakers or NGO people? Like, whatever choices you're analyzing, what the choices were made by the news organization as to what to present to you for that news story. Because everything there that was put on that site was deliberate.
Okay. Got you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Perfect. Other questions? That was a good question. So I think everybody's kind of, oh, Brianna, go for it. Go for it.
I'm sorry. Well, yesterday I had emailed you because I wanted like clarification because I was filling out the news, was it the news article form?
Mhm.
And for I read the instructions. It said it had to be like each article from the three different sources had to be from like the same event. Was that like the event? Did you mean by like our topic or what we specifically chose to talk about that
That
relates to the topic?
the same story. So let's say that your overarching controversial topic that you picked was gun control, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so let's talk, in 2018, there was a move to ban bump stocks after Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So you would look at three stories that talk about the legislative move to remove bump stocks. So
Okay.
yeah, so those would be the three stories. Or if you talked about like DACA, for instance, the Supreme Court made a decision about, keeping DACA in place
Mm-hmm.
last summer. So you would look over. So even though your overarching topic is DACA, specifically the story you're looking at is that the Supreme Court stayed DACA, and then you would look at the coverage of that particular event.
Okay.
Yeah,
Got it.
because the idea is that you're looking at one event and looking at how three different organizations presented the information to you.
Okay. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
and the whole point of the paper is, here's the event, here's how they covered it, and here's what's similar and different. The actual like event is kind of besides the point. The whole point of the paper is, hey, let's look at three newspaper articles and see if they covered the story the same or if they covered it differently. That's really the kind of the crux of it. The whole intent of this paper is to kind of show you the reason I designed the paper like this, and it's a very unusual style of paper. I know you've probably never done anything like this before. And the reason I'm doing this is because undergrads have a propensity, and to be honest, a lot of grad students have a propensity of doing it too, where they'll pick one topic, they'll pick one source, and they're like, okay, I'm good. Like I got a source that covers whatever I'm talking about. But the thing is that whatever biases or agendas that are inside of that news organization or whatever that source was, you've bought that. If that's all you're coming from. So whatever they think, you think now too, because you decided to only keep that one source. So the reason why I have people do this is because showing them that even though they're getting this, even though they're getting data on the exact same thing, it can be vastly different than if you go from source to source, or what like information you grab comes from source to source. So the whole purpose of this is to kind of encourage you to say to yourself, a diversity of sources is really important, because even though you have, because a lot of people will go like, oh man, it wants like 20 sources. How am I going to do that in a paper? Easy. You get multiple sources talking about the same thing, because you're going to get a little bit of different information from each one. And if all of the sources are saying the same thing, that's awesome, because what that means is whatever information you're getting is pretty valid and is pretty good then, if more than one source is saying it. So either way you win. So by getting a multitude of sources, by having a diversity of sources, even if it's on the same idea or um, same evidence that you're bringing in your paper, it's going to do nothing but make your paper stronger and show that you know what you're doing. I guarantee you, if you do this in in one of your senior level courses where you bring in a multitude of sources on the same thing, it's going to show due diligence, and you're going to look really good to other professors to say like, wow, you actually took the time to look at this stuff and find it. And as you know, like as from looking at this, it doesn't take all that long. Like it could be just like the link underneath you as you're looking for the topic. And so and a lot of these things aren't very long to read either, like a page. So or a page and a half. So what I'm trying to show you guys is that by looking at a diversity of sources, you end up strengthening your paper.
Thank you.
Awesome. But good question. Other questions? And that was kind of to the point of what I was getting at, is that you guys are going to notice that, in some cases your papers will be all this, the coverage will be the same. And that is okay, by the way. If the coverage is the same, that's fine. You just mentioned that in your paper. I want you to think of this paper as kind of like an experiment, like a lab, that you're taking 3 different variables and you're going to see what happens. And if they're all the same and they all have the same coverage, that's totally cool. You do not need to change your paper, because that was the whole point of the experiment. Are they similar? Are they different? Because what we'll do is once everybody turns their paper in, we'll have a cool little discussion about it. Like, hey, what did you find? What was different? What was similar? What did you think? And so we'll have an interesting diversity of sources on that. So if you get I just want to let people know, like if it's not, if they're not drastically different, that's okay. I don't want you to like go and redo all that work just because you want to have something a little bit more interesting than, hey, they weren't all, they were all the same and they covered the same thing for the most part. That's cool. That is a legitimate answer. Sometimes I'll ask questions in a prompt and sometimes the answer is no. Like, do they disagree? No. Okay, move on to the next question. And so like answering the question accurately is going to be the best way to move through this thing. It's just going to be like a lab. Like if you were in a chemistry lab and you put a green or a yellow liquid and a blue liquid, it should turn green. But if it turns purple for some odd reason, because of the chemical reaction, well, are you going to redo the experiment? No, you're going to write down that it turned purple. And so that's what we're doing here. We're looking at all these different sources and we're going to see, are they similar? Are they different? If so, how? The only reason I say that is because it's happened before where people get frustrated that they're not different. So I'm like, don't worry. I don't want you doing more work unnecessarily. Other questions? How are you guys feeling? Is this making a little bit more sense as we're kind of like working through it?
Yeah, most definitely. Because I was first going to start my paper last night, and then I followed your advice of watching the video, and it really helped a lot.
Yeah, watch that first. Watch the video first before you start writing. That's all I need you to do, is to write again. And then the other thing too is that I've already been approving and giving comments for people's forms. So if you haven't turned in your form yet, which I think most of you in this call already have, which means that you've probably already, who here has already gotten approval from me? Freddie, you got approval already, right?
Yeah. I did.
So I'm just working through them as we're going along. So I imagine like later on tonight, as people are turning in their forms, I'm blasting through them. So you'll be seeing more and more of them. By the way, keep an eye out. I'm finishing up recording all of your grades because I had a server issue and I thought I lost your writing samples. So luckily I found them on my backup. So we're good. So those are going to get updated. I've already recorded the grades. Everybody got, if you turned it in, you got 100. So you'll be seeing that recorded on Blackboard. I'm also recording the quizzes and the newspaper article forms. So you should be seeing updated grades by the end of the week. That way you can kind of see just where you're at. I want to keep a running tally. That way you're not like, oh my God, how am I doing? So you've already noticed that I'm doing that for the journal articles pretty quick, for the writing journals pretty quickly. So the rest of that should be getting updated. It's just, there's no automatic way to do it from my spreadsheet to Blackboard. So I have to do it by hand, like each grade. So that turns into hundreds very quickly. So bear with me, but it is getting done. That is the thing I'm working on. The thing that I'm prioritizing though right now is as as your forms are coming in, I'm approving or not approving. I'm approving or giving you critiques, because most of the part, it's not that I haven't said these are bad sources. The biggest mistake that I'm seeing is people are picking all from like one bucket. Like they're picking like the New York Times, the LA Times, and then like the Washington Post, which are all in the mainstream news source bucket. And I tell people, keep your sources. Like, even if I tell you like use 2 other sources, like in an international web base, keep the sources you found, like hold on to them, because that's just going to add more information for when you get to your final. You'll have a ton of information by the time you get to your final. So everything that you find that you think is good but doesn't quite fit for what you're doing in the hot newspaper, save it, because it's going to save you some trouble like 6 weeks from now. It's like it's less work you have to do again. So just make sure like you either like save it as like hit print and then hit save as PDF. That way you can just save the file, or just like bookmark it and just have bookmarks of all of the stuff that you found. It'll make your life a lot easier, or print it out. Any other questions? And then the citation workshop's pretty dead simple. I'm going to show you a website and you just tell me like who's the author, like show me what the citation is in APA, what's the citation in Chicago. The citation workshop literally takes all of like 10 minutes. And then like write 2 example sentences that quote from the source. You do that for 3 news articles. Yeah, it's not a big deal. It's just there to reinforce what you're doing. So you'll see that come next week. It takes all of like 10 minutes. Just don't put it off, because then you'll be rushing at the last minute. Other than that, I think you guys feeling you're gonna get in a good spot? Is anybody using Chicago, by the way, or is everybody APA? Everybody's APA? Okay, cool. So the lion's share of the parenthetical citation stuff is going to be really useful for you. For this paper, you're not going to have to worry about page numbers, as I mentioned before. You're all getting it from electronic sources. There are no page numbers. So just make sure that you're including the author's name and the year. They should always be next to each other, author's name and year. Okay, and that's why we're having a rough draft. So come Tuesday, so come a week from today, is the rough draft. And so feel free to go ahead and send me your rough drafts. And if you send them to me early, I'll try and make sure to get through them as quickly as I can, to give you feedback. The sooner I do it, the more time you have to do your final. And it's okay if it's not the full paper. You can even just give me like just a page of where you're at. If you want, the more you give me, the more I can edit. So just put it that way. So feel free to send that over to me, and we'll have more opportunity. Like once you got your bearings and you're seeing what's going on Thursday, you can give me an idea of like where you want to take it, and feel free to ask me like personalized questions about your paper and like what is it that you want to go over. Okay. So with that, if we don't have any questions, I think we're going to wrap it up. Do I have any other outstanding questions that you guys want answered? Cool. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. You guys are my stalwarts. Like, I depend on you. So thank you. I hope you guys have a great day. And if you haven't already, I would knock out the writing journal now. If you haven't done so already, it's easy. It's really good. It's interesting. It's nerdy. It's about typography. So I know I'm having you watch a video on fonts. And I also put a little exercise in there to like give some practice on citations. So I give you the example citation and see if you want to use it. So the writing journal is a good time to just kind of try it out and just make sure that you're getting it down pat for using citations properly. So parentheticals. So I hope you guys have a great day, and I will see you guys on Thursday.